I am so excited to be here today. I am with Leach of Leach Legal. We are talking the nasty topic. Well, it's not really nasty, but the misconception topic, or the topic that people don't want to talk about, divorce lawyers. We've had a lot of questions from you guys, a lot of interest in this topic, so I thought we'd bring in the expert. Catherine's here to have a chat to us today about how to go through or how to choose a good divorce lawyer, why you need a divorce lawyer, why not just try to do it yourself, and basically everything there is to know about the strategy behind the importance of this highly emotional topic. So welcome, Catherine.
Thank you, Rayne.
I just want to ask you a little bit about Leach Legal first.
Yeah. So Leach Legal, we're 15 years young. We're the largest family law firm in Perth, and we're really super focused on strategy with our clients and also really great client service, just to make sure that all our clients feel really supported, because it is such a hugely emotional time for them.
So, I mean, I waited, I think, 3 years from separation to engage in a lawyer because I just, we were having a really, amicable relationship, and I just thought that engaging a family lawyer would basically ruin all that. I didn't, the moment you start hearing he's got a lawyer, she's got a lawyer, it just, it just flies around, and it can get a little bit, nasty. Why is that, do you think?
Look, I think it's a reality sometimes. I think it's important for people to choose the right lawyer and to understand the strategy and be in control of the situation, so that if there are letters going out, that they read them, they understand the tone of them, that they're not being unreasonable, because it can, everyone gets a letter from a lawyer, even if it's not a family law lawyer, and they just look at it and think, oh my God, I'm in trouble.
Your heart starts
going it does. Yeah. It's like anyone from the tax department.
Yeah. Yes.
So, you have to manage it really well. And, really good family lawyers are all about trying to have a functional settlement, so getting people through it without blowing up the family.
Because that's, I guess, again, another misconception out there. Well, it's not really a misconception. I've had friends that have spent upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars, in lawyers' fees. So I guess, that doesn't have a great reputation when it comes to divorce. So how do you ensure that people are going through the right channels and doing it the right way?
I think people have to have a really good understanding about what is likely to happen at the worst case scenario. So if it went to trial, what is the worst case scenario? And be really vigilant about understanding that. And then, being commercial about it and saying, well, hang on, if I'm going to spend $100,000 in legal fees and I'm going to get $100,000 more, is that worth it? Just, having that understanding around your costs, around the time frames, and ask the questions.
Yeah, and I think the other thing was, starting when I started to look into lawyers, there were some where people said, this one is fee driven, so they will push things out and not help you get a resolution, whereas this one's some that can get a resolution. So what is it like at Leach? Sort of what's your ethos?
So we are about resolution, and, probably it's trite to say that, but we have a meeting every morning with the whole firm to talk about our tasks today. And when somebody says, oh, yesterday I had a mediation and I settled, everyone genuinely says, well done, that's great. Like, there's a real culture around, we want people to settle, we want them to get a resolution. And I sort of, obviously really like to see that sort of outcome, because you can spend a lot of money and go to trial, but you have an uncertain outcome. So we'd rather have 100 people getting an agreement than 10 people going to trial.
And I have heard that you guys have that reputation. That is one of the, as a family law firm.
Yeah.
That is a big reputation. And so, because there's another way that people go about it. It's very, obviously an emotional time. And so the moment someone says, that's it, I want a divorce, people are out there getting lawyers. How do you advise your clients? Is there a strategy around it? Should they engage someone straight away? Should they talk to their partner first, even if it is emotional? What's the sort of good way to go about it? If there is good.
Yeah.
Is there a good way to go about it?
Yeah. So my experience and what I do, which seems to work, is I have, if I have people who come in really early, I've had a client who had just separated the night before, who came to see me, and it sounds really, a little bit contrived and a little bit, unnecessary. But I was able to say, look, this is the way that you do it. Have a discussion first of all. Say these things. Listen. Don't don't put your side forward, talk about the kids in this way, and then come back to me. And so then they were going to come back in 2 weeks once they had all that information, and just stepping them through that. And the results are so much better because they're not falling into their old patterns. So you have a pattern with your husband or your partner where they say this and you get angry, and then you say that to them, and then they get upset and you go round and round. So you break that pattern with the proper way to talk to them, which we give them.
Yeah, because it can be highly emotional, and so I mean, on another point, would you advise? How would you advise that they stay amicable? Just talk, without letters.
Well, it's the communication, and I say to people, look, we need to send a letter because we need to start the process because you've been separated for 3 years or whatever it is. So we need to send this letter. It's not an aggressive letter. It's here we are. We want to get started. Here's the next steps. And what I recommend you do is that you contact your ex and say you'll be getting a letter from a lawyer so that they're not surprised by it.
Yeah, and I think, I think the other thing is the greed. So, I think with your clients, how do you ensure if you get a client and they've disclosed all this and the other partner is saying, I want, this amount, and your client is saying, I want this amount. Like, how do you know as a client that you're actually getting the right advice?
Well, I think it comes back to choosing your lawyer in the beginning, and you may want to get a couple of opinions. It's the same with medical opinions, I suppose, if you really want to go and get them. But your lawyer needs to explain it to you. There needs to be a really clear explanation as to why do you think you're entitled to X amount, 70%, and what's the likelihood of getting that. But it's such an uncertain process because if you go all the way, it's a judge or a magistrate who makes the decision, and they've got a range of what is likely.
Yeah, so the number one outcome is to obviously settle before you get to that point.
Yeah.
And that's what you guys are all about.
Yeah, so we do lots and lots of mediations, and we have for a long time. It's pretty much compulsory before you go to court now that you've got to do mediation, so we do more and more of them. And our success rate is really high, but they're better outcomes. They're not just success because we say, look, you need to give in because we want to get a tick for our success rate.
Yeah.
They're good outcomes that people can live with, and that they finish their stuff, years before they would if they had to go to the family court.
And things like, the difference between something costing $10,000 and something cost $100,000. When you first sign a client up, I guess, is that something that's pretty obvious whether it's going to be, in box A or box B, or is that a huge variable as well?
So I explain it to clients that, this is a chess game. So our strategy is we know that you have to get from the beginning and you want to get to the other side. So we know that strategy, but as we go along, our strategy will change depending on where the pieces move. And you want somebody who's got that clear overview rather than just sitting back going, oh gosh, we got another letter from them, we better do this. But saying, no, we're driving it. We want to do this now and this now and this now. But you can do a mediation, you can spend all day at a mediation, you can get an agreement drawn up, and then the next day one of the parties can say, I've thought about it, I don't want to do it anymore.
Back to square one.
Back to square one, and that's probably worse in some ways because you feel like you've finished.
Yeah.
But you can't control it.
And it's not, divorce is obviously not recommended, but the reality is that I think 50% of marriages end in divorce. What would be sort of top 3 things that you would say for someone out there, who has been asked for a divorce or wanting a divorce? What is their next step? What should they do?
I think the legal advice is really important early on. Just have one appointment. We have one appointment where we say to people, like, come for an hour. You don't have to do anything from there. And I think you want to be really reassured that you're going to have good communication with your lawyer, so that if you're ringing them and they don't ring you back for 3 days, I've had lawyers on the other side who don't come back. Yeah. And we're super obsessed with being responsive to clients. I see them, everyone's running around getting people to make calls and things because we understand, if it's Friday afternoon and you're waiting on a response to something and nobody rings you back, you've got the whole weekend where you're sitting and stressing about it. So I think making sure that they're a super responsive firm. Have a look at their reviews. Obviously everyone goes on reviews now. Ask them about, what's your position about alternative dispute resolution, mediation, arbitration, those sorts of things, and what's your success rate in terms of mediation? Do you settle a lot of them? important.
Wonderful. That's huge advice on a very yucky topic, but something that is reality and that we all have to talk about. So thank you, Catherine. And we'll put Catherine's details here and ask us any questions on the comments below. And thanks for tuning in.